Satchwell, good evening, and thank you very much for your time on the Newsfeed Late Night tonight.
Good evening to you.
I know you did not issue any confirmed or rather official findings, but you did, however, engage with a number of individuals within the sector as well as entities who came and submitted documents to you. Did you find that there is overall an ethics challenge within South African journalism?
We found that there are many factors that contribute perhaps towards an ethical challenge. I mean, they range from the lack of diverse media. They include the fact that financial resources are very strained. We looked at safety of journalists. And so all these contextual factors could contribute to media issues. But we certainly did not find that the media as a whole or the journalists or reporters as a whole have anything other than the desire to produce appropriate, honest, effective reporting that would enhance the South African democracy.
Yeah. Now, unlike the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture that's currently going on, you functioned a little bit differently with a number of constraints. You didn't have, for example, a secretariat, you didn't have investigators, and you didn't have evidence leaders. Is that in any way, do you think, will impede on the integrity of this report? And maybe many players might come and say, well, you didn't investigate that and there are loopholes here.
You're absolutely right. It has its limitations, but the difference, of course, is that this is not a statutory inquiry. We have no powers to subpoena people, to oblige them to give evidence, to oblige them to answer questions. And so we were very dependent upon goodwill and the collaboration of those interested in the media, whether they were members of the public or media practitioners. And it is amazing the number of people who came forward, many of them seeking anonymity, but people who came forward with ideas, with thoughts, with critiques, with comments, with criticisms, and it added up, I think, to quite a vibrant, robust whole, where we are able at least to say that we have heard from an incredible diversity and a wide number of people.
Did you get a broad participation by media players, those who, of course, we have mentioned, but also other independent media practitioners at this point?
Yes.
And talk to me then about some of your key recommendations. Particularly, let's look at, because you've divided it into various sections, but let's look particularly and zoom in on the ethics and the standards. You're saying SANEF should work towards introducing a register of income or interests for media practitioners. Why that recommendation?
Well, that particular recommendation pertains to those who practice in the media industry. And to the extent that they are criticized or critiqued, or it's suggested that they are not independent, just as, for instance, I as a judge have been obliged, firstly, to receive no income from any earned income other than my work as a judge while I was in full-time practice as a judge. I am obliged to make disclosure of all my assets and all my income on a register. Now, if that's necessary to ensure the credibility and ensure the independence of the judiciary, it might be something to be discussed as to whether or not it would assist in creating the view and the appreciation that journalists are independent practitioners. But you must remember that all these recommendations are suggestions for debate and discussion by the media industry. So we suggested that various steps be taken to enhance media freedom. We looked at media diversity and ethics and standards. There were many recommendations there, not least that the public, that we the public should actually know what it is that journalists subscribe to and the various codes of practice that they believe are important.
Now, you suggest also the reopening consideration of sanctions. What sort of sanctions, sort of fines do you think media organizations should be able to pay should journalists actually commit ethical breaches?
I don't think we're necessarily looking at fines, but a sanction could be in line with one of our other recommendations. We have recommended that all journalists who want to be seen as independent, as committed to democracy, as desiring to uphold high standards of practice, that they should subscribe to a code of conduct, whether it is the code of conduct of the BCCSA, which regulates the broadcasting media, or whether it is the Press Council's Code of Ethics, which deals with print media and online media. Now, if, for instance, a journalist says, here I am, I have subscribed to and I adhere to these particular ethical practices and standards of work, and they fail to so subscribe, well, one sanction could be that they are suspended in their membership for a period of time from the organization that provides that code of practice. That would be a sanction. But again, all this is for discussion and debate and consideration by SANEF and the media industry itself.
Yeah, we're dealing with a lot now of digital media content that is, of course, available in various forms and in various platforms. Are you saying there needs to be a code that comes or that is developed, I suppose, to particularly hold those who are in those platforms accountable?
Well, there is already a code, a very internationally recognized and accepted code. It is the code created by and continually revamped and discussed and developed by the Press Council. And it covers not only the print media, but it does cover online media. But of course, as you know, and as the world is concerned, online media and those who blog and those who Twitter and those who tweet and all the rest of it are not necessarily journalists and do not necessarily subscribe to any codes of practice. So one of the issues and one of the things we have recommended is that an attempt be made to ensure that all online practitioners, members of social media who want to do so on a regular basis, that they look at the issue of officially subscribing, that they voluntarily join and proclaim that they adhere to certain ethical codes. Yeah.
Now, Justice Satchwell, one would say, well, your profession, you're a judge. I suppose that's what you do, and it's easier to monitor and put a register of your income. But you're talking about journalists who are freelancers in most cases, and therefore to augment their salaries, they get into other professions. They would be DJs, they would be presenters, and so on and so forth. How should then that particular aspect of things be approached?
Well, again, this is a suggestion that is for discussion and debate by SANEF and the media industry. But for instance, and I merely give this as a hypothetical, let's assume that you were a journalist operating in a specific field, whether it is finance or whether it is science or whether it's health or the environment. Perhaps you would want to know whether or not that journalist is on retainer or being paid by lobbyists or has a financial interest in that particular sector, and as a result may or may not be advancing the interests of an interest group.
Right. I think I get you there. I get you there. Let's talk then a little bit more about media freedom. I mean, when you look generally in South Africa, do government institutions, do individual policymakers, do constitutional entities respect media freedom in South Africa?
We didn't have complaints that government per se or the political parties per se had set out deliberately to diminish in any way media freedom. But immediately I must point out that we have been told that there are political parties who have refused to allow the representatives of certain media to their meetings or to report on them. We've been told that threats have been made against journalists by particular groupings. We know that there was a cabinet minister who claimed that he had bribed a journalist and then withdrew. He retracted that allegation. Now, all those don't enhance media freedom. All those perhaps operate as restraints upon the work of journalists and on the work of reporting fairly and accurately for the interests of the South African populace.
Yeah. Drawing up a media freedom declaration based on the constitutional principles, how do you think that is going to assist, and how do you see it working?
Well, there are a number of codes of practice. There are supposedly commitments by a great many entities and organizations to the South African Constitution. There is an Africa Declaration, and it may be that SANEF and the media industry would believe that a declaration which could then be used to encourage civil society and government role players to individually or as a group commit thereto would be an activity which would enhance and which would publicize commitment to ethical practice and to the role of the media in maintaining the South African democratic project.
Yeah. Justice, there are tensions, there are ongoing tensions within the media space or between the journalistic space, maybe tensions between journalists and certain politicians, among journalists themselves, amongst journalists and certain businesses. How do you recommend that that particular tension be dealt with?
We haven't recommended that any steps be taken with regard to tensions within the media industry, because sometimes they are personal issues, sometimes they are financial and competitive issues. But perhaps if the industry as a whole was working on a combined project to enhance the status of the media in South Africa, that might go some way towards alleviating such tensions or factionalism as you believe exists.
Yeah. Now, of course, we've got other areas of your recommendations to look at as well. Financial resources, support in recognition of media organization. What do you suggest is a viable and a sustainable form of support financially that could be afforded to media practitioners?
Well, the first answer I'd give is that if I knew the answer to that, I think everybody throughout the world would be employing me at vast sums of money to provide the magic bullet. And I think the answer is that throughout the world, the media is under a great deal of pressure. Everybody is being quite innovative, quite adventurous, and is looking in every direction for solutions to problems. So we have suggested that steps be taken to see what everybody else is doing throughout the world. But there are a variety of suggestions we've made. We've suggested that there be a lobby for perhaps public money to be invested in what we see as the public good, which is the media. We have suggested that there be engagement to look at funds which go outside of the country, Facebook, Google, and such like, possibly looking at taxation of those entities, and to make inquiries into how tax revenue and other issues can be used to assist an industry which is in very financial straits at the moment.
Justice Satchwell, I appreciate your time and thank you for outlining some of those recommendations for us tonight. That's retired Judge Kathleen Satchwell, commissioned, of course, to look into ethical issues within South African journalism.